The psychology of money. You've been earning money for years, maybe a decade, maybe longer. And somewhere along the way, you stopped thinking the problem was how much you make. The problem became something else, something harder to name. You look at your bank account and feel nothing, or worse, you feel that quiet anxiety that never fully leaves, the one that sits in your chest even when the numbers are fine. You've read the books. You know compound interest exists. You understand that starting earlier would have been better. You've watched the videos about budgeting, investing, retirement planning. And still, something keeps breaking down between knowing and doing. It's not laziness. You work hard. You're responsible in most areas of your life. You show up. You perform. But with money, there's this invisible wall. You'll research investment accounts for weeks and never open one. You'll plan to save more next month and then spend impulsively on something you didn't need. You'll feel anxious about your financial future while simultaneously avoiding looking at it directly. And the strangest part, you can't explain why. It's like some part of you knows what to do, and another part quietly prevents you from doing it. You've probably told yourself it's just about discipline, about willpower, about finally getting serious. But here's what nobody tells you. Your relationship with money was never about money. It was always about something older, something that started long before you earned your first paycheck, before you opened your first bank account, before you even understood what money was. There's a pattern underneath all of this, a psychological script you've been running unconsciously for years. And until you see it clearly, nothing actually changes. You don't need better strategies. You need to recognize what's been driving the behavior all along. Because once you see it, really see it, something shifts. Not because you fixed it, because you finally stopped pretending it wasn't there. Let's start with something simple. Think about the last time you spent money impulsively. Not a planned purchase, not something you needed. The kind of spending that happens quickly, almost automatically, usually late at night or after a long day. What were you feeling right before? Most people say, nothing. They weren't feeling anything. It just happened. But that's not true. You were feeling something. You just weren't paying attention to it. There was exhaustion, or boredom, or that low-grade frustration that comes from a day where nothing felt satisfying, or loneliness, or that quiet disappointment you've gotten very good at ignoring. And somewhere in that emotional space, buying something felt like relief, not because you wanted the thing, because the act of buying temporarily regulated something inside you. It gave you a small sense of control, a brief moment where you chose something, where something arrived that you decided on, where for 30 seconds life felt less heavy. That's not financial irresponsibility. That's emotional survival. And you've been doing it for years without realizing it. Because money has never just been money for you. It's been the thing you use to manage feelings you don't know how to process directly. When you feel powerless, you spend. When you feel unsafe, you hoard. When you feel behind, you avoid. When you feel ashamed, you pretend everything's fine. The behavior looks financial, but it's not. It's emotional. And the problem is this: you've been trying to fix a psychological pattern with financial tools. You've been treating the symptom, not the structure underneath. That's why the advice doesn't work. Not because the advice is wrong, because you're solving the wrong problem. Now here's where it gets harder. Let's talk about what happens when you actually try to change. You decide, really decide, to start investing, to open that retirement account, to automate your savings, to finally take money seriously. You feel motivated, clear, ready. And then something strange happens. Right before you're about to execute, you hesitate. Not because you don't understand how. You do. You've watched the tutorials. You know which buttons to press. You hesitate because some part of you feels unsafe. Like crossing this threshold will change something fundamental about who you are. Like committing money to the future means admitting you're the kind of person who plans long-term now. And that thought, quietly, unconsciously, terrifies you. Because planning long-term means accepting that this is your life, that this is the path you're on, that you're not waiting anymore for everything to magically align. It means accepting responsibility for a future version of yourself you're not sure you believe in yet. That's what the hesitation actually is. Not confusion. Fear. Fear of becoming someone your past self wouldn't recognize. So you delay. You tell yourself you'll do it next week. You find another video to watch. You convince yourself you need more research. But you already know enough. You're just not ready to emotionally commit to the identity shift required to act. And this exact moment, is where most people stay stuck for years. Not because they lack information, because the information demands they become someone different. And becoming someone different means grieving who they've been. That grief is invisible, but it's the real obstacle. Let's go deeper. You grew up watching someone handle money a certain way. Maybe they were anxious about it. Maybe they spent recklessly. Maybe they were obsessively frugal. Maybe they never talked about it at all. Whatever it was, you absorbed it, not consciously. You didn't decide to. You just took it in. Because when you're young, you don't analyze your parents' financial behavior. You feel it. You feel the tension in the air when bills arrive. You feel the shame when someone says no to something you wanted. You feel the relief when payday comes. You feel the fear underneath the silence about money. And somewhere in your nervous system, a conclusion formed, not a thought, a feeling-based belief, something like asterisk, money is dangerous, or asterisk, money disappears, or asterisk, people who care about money are cold, or asterisk, wanting money makes you selfish, or asterisk, no matter how much you have, it's never safe. You didn't choose this belief, it chose you, and now, decades later, it's still running. When you avoid investing, that belief is active. When you spend impulsively, that belief is active. When you feel guilty for wanting more, that belief is active. When you sabotage yourself right before a financial breakthrough, that belief is active. You think you're making decisions. You're not. You're repeating a pattern you learned before you even had language for it. And here's the part that makes it so hard to change. That pattern originally protected you. It helped you survive an environment where money felt unstable, shameful, or emotionally loaded. So your nervous system treats it as safety. Even now, when the environment is completely different, the pattern persists. Because your body doesn't know the difference between past danger and present stability. It just knows, this is how we survived before. So it keeps running the same script. Now let's talk about what happens when you start earning more. You finally get the raise, the promotion, the better job. You think, this will fix it. More income means less stress, less anxiety, finally, breathing room. And for a few weeks, it does feel better. But then something strange happens. The anxiety returns, not as intensely, but it's there, quietly, in the background. You're earning more than ever. Your bank account looks healthier. You should feel secure, but you don't. You still feel behind. You still feel like it's not enough. You still feel that low-grade panic about the future. And you can't understand why. Here's why. The anxiety was never about the amount. It was about the feeling underneath the amount. And that feeling doesn't change just because the number changes. Because the feeling isn't financial, it's psychological. It's the feeling that no matter what you do, you're never truly safe. That disaster is always one mistake away. That you're always on the edge of losing everything. That feeling doesn't come from your bank account. It comes from a much older place. A place where survival felt uncertain, where love felt conditional, where approval felt earned, where safety felt temporary. And now, no matter how much you earn, that feeling persists. Because you're trying to solve an emotional problem with a financial solution, and it doesn't work. You can't earn your way out of emotional unsafety. You can't invest your way out of childhood fear. You can't budget your way out of nervous system dysregulation. The number will never be enough, because the number was never the problem. Here's what most people don't realize about financial self-sabotage. It's not random. It's not weakness, it's not lack of discipline, it's protection. Let me explain. Think about the last time you were close to a financial breakthrough. Maybe you were about to invest a significant amount. Maybe you were about to commit to a long-term plan. Maybe you were finally about to take money seriously, and then, right before, you did something that derailed it. You spent impulsively. You delayed. You talked yourself out of it. You created a crisis that demanded your attention elsewhere. Consciously, you felt frustrated with yourself. You wondered why you always do this. But unconsciously, you were protecting yourself from something much scarier than failure. You were protecting yourself from success. Because success means visibility. It means being seen as someone who has their life together. It means expectations, responsibility, the possibility of losing what you've built, the fear of outgrowing people you love, the guilt of doing better than people who raised you. Success means becoming someone your past self might not recognize, and some part of you, the part that's been trying to keep you safe your whole life, doesn't trust that. So it sabotages, not to hurt you, to protect you from exposure, from disappointment, from the terror of getting everything you wanted and still feeling empty. That's the real fear, not failure. The possibility that success won't fix you either. So unconsciously, you stay stuck. Because stuck feels safer than visible. Struggling feels safer than exposed. Behind feels safer than responsible for more. And until you see this pattern clearly, until you recognize what it's actually protecting you from, it will keep running. Forever. Let's talk about something most people avoid. The relationship between money and identity. You probably don't think of yourself as having a financial identity, but you do. It's the story you tell yourself about who you are with money. Maybe you're bad with money. Maybe you're not the investing type. Maybe you're someone who works hard but never gets ahead. These aren't facts. They're identities, and identities are incredibly sticky. Because once you decide who you are, your behavior organizes itself around that identity. If you're bad with money, then of course you don't invest. That's not who you are. If you're not the planning type, then of course you avoid long-term financial decisions. That's not your personality. The identity becomes a cage. But it feels like truth. And here's the dangerous part. You'll unconsciously protect that identity, even when it hurts you. Because changing your financial behavior means changing who you are. And changing who you are feels like death. Not actual death, but identity death. The death of the person you've been. The version of yourself you've known. The story you've been telling about why things are the way they are. And most people would rather stay stuck in a familiar identity than grieve the loss of who they've been. Even if that identity is limiting. Even if it's painful. because familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar change. That's why people stay bad with money for decades. Not because they can't learn, because learning would mean becoming someone new. And becoming someone new requires letting someone old die. That grief is real, and most people avoid it at all costs. Here's the part nobody talks about. Financial growth is lonely. Not always, not at first, but eventually. Because when you start taking money seriously, when you stop spending impulsively, when you start investing, when you delay gratification, you start making different decisions than the people around you. You stop going out as much. You stop buying things to keep up. You stop pretending money doesn't matter. And slowly, quietly, you start feeling separate. Not because you're better, because you're different now. Your priorities shifted, your behavior changed, and the people who knew the old version of you don't fully recognize this one. They don't say anything directly, but you feel it. The subtle judgment, the quiet distance, the jokes about you being responsible now that don't quite feel like jokes. And it hurts, because part of you wonders, am I becoming the kind of person I used to resent? The kind of person who cares about retirement accounts and compound interest and long-term plans? The kind of person who's boring? And that thought, that quiet fear, makes you want to go back, to prove you're still the same, to prove money didn't change you, to prove you're still fun, still spontaneous, still you. So you spend, you go out, you buy something you don't need, you prove you're not one of those people. And in doing so, you sabotage the very thing you were trying to build, because you couldn't tolerate the loneliness of growth. That's what nobody tells you about changing your relationship with money. It costs you, not just financially, socially, emotionally, relationally. It costs you the version of yourself other people were comfortable with. And that loss is real. Most people turn back here. They choose familiarity over growth, connection over transformation. Not because they're weak, because the price of change is higher than anyone admits. Now let's talk about the moment things actually shift. Not the fantasy version, the real one. You're sitting alone, late at night, looking at your account. And for the first time, you're not pretending anymore. You're not telling yourself it's fine. You're not blaming circumstances. You're not waiting for things to magically improve. You're just looking at the years of avoidance, the pattern of self-sabotage, the gap between what you know and what you do. And something breaks open, not dramatically, quietly. You realize, this is mine. Not your parents' fault, not your job's fault, not the economy's fault. Yours, the decisions, the delays, the distractions, the ways you've used money to avoid feelings you didn't want to face. All of it, yours. And that realization, it doesn't feel empowering at first. It feels heavy, because responsibility is heavy. But underneath the weight, there's something else. Relief. Because if it's yours, then you can finally change it. Not by trying harder, not by finding better strategies, by seeing it clearly. The pattern, the fear, the protection, the identity, the loneliness, the grief, all of it. And once you see it, really see it, you can't unsee it. The behavior doesn't disappear immediately, but the unconsciousness does. You start catching yourself mid-pattern, mid-sabotage, mid-avoidance. And instead of judging yourself, you just notice. Oh, I'm doing it again. That noticing is everything, because you can't change what you can't see. And for years you weren't seeing it. You were just reacting, repeating, running the same script without knowing it was a script. But now you see it, and that changes everything. If you've made it here with me, I want to invite you to